What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Ian's Life, and welcome back to the Budget Bushplane Schnook. We are back on the controls, and we're back on that torque tube we left off on. Stay tuned. So for this next bit, I got working without explaining what I was doing, so let me take a moment to explain it here before we jump into the time lapse. What you're about to see me do is start to work on the blocks that are going to hold the torque tube. If you recall the torque tube, the last thing we did, it was the piece that holds the control sticks and links them together. So now we're going to be building the support that actually holds that tube and allows it to mount to the airplane. So let's go jump over to the time lapse and watch me do that. So with their holes drilled in this guy, we can now use some screws just kind of set in here to hold them around the stick or the torque tube. I'm really happy with this. This is working very well. The tension's about right. And you can also start to see, if you can imagine these two little screws that are here actually being longer and going through both pieces of metal with some spacers to hold it in the center, you can start to imagine how this is going to go. I decided to change my order of operations a little bit. I was going to build another plastic block, but I realized, you know what? Before I build the plastic block, let's get the sheet metal that's going to hold it. If anything I don't like about this happens, I may have wasted one of these if I designed it for a certain way of doing things. So I went on the computer real quick and just drew up a drawing of how I want to do this. This is our piece of metal that's going to fold up into this. You can already see I've got a couple little lines on here. That's going to be our fold marks. And then two holes at the bottom attaching it to the tube. A couple holes here which are going to correspond to effectively these guys. And I think we will be in business. So I am going to go ahead and start bending this guy up. I think my press brake is going to be the tool of the day for this. So I haven't used that thing in a minute, so I'm going to go over there and, well, actually, scratch that. This would be pretty hard to drill once I have bent it. So I think we're going to go ahead and do all of our drilling on this first. Then we'll go ahead and put it on the press brake, fold it up, and see how it fits in the airplane. So we've got our flat pattern here all drilled out. I've already gone ahead and used my tool here to deburr all the backside holes because they're not going to be accessible once this is folded up. So I think at this point we can go ahead and take this over to the press brake and bend this into 290s and make a U of it. See how it fits in the airplane. Fingers crossed that when I go to bend this, I can actually get a box out of it. Clearance is always an interesting issue when you're bending things. So we'll see. We may have to do a part of this on a vise or on a different type of brake. Let's try it out. So I went ahead and just did a test install of everything, because it's when you don't test things that you run into unexpected problems. So if you look down into the bracket, you can see our plastic piece, which is actually, it was intended to be the front one, but realistically, they're going to be exactly the same. That's in there. We don't have spacers yet. There's going to be some spacers to stand this off. I could have made this full width, 4 inches, but this plastic is heavier than you'd think, and it's not doing anything except just filling out air. So we'll make some little spacers to step that into the middle. The sheet metal's here. Again, we have not drilled our front hole, but I've got that clecoed in as it will be in the back with some rivets. So we'll have a second rivet there. I'm using some old bolts across here, but everything works as it should. That's in there. Without the front one in there, it is dipping a little bit, which is causing it to bind a tiny bit. We're going to have to be very careful when we drill our front holes to make sure everything is perfectly axial. In fact, we'll probably mount the front, then drill this back one. That'll allow a tiny bit of vertical movement, which will allow these guys to just perfectly slide into place. Literally as I record this, I just had the thought, if I don't drill this one, I only use the back two, and then I drill the bottom of that one. There's rotation then in both of these. That'll allow them to self-jig to perfect center, and we'll be able to get them perfectly in line. That's how we're gonna do this. This works though. We may put a hole in the top for weight just to lighten this guy up a little bit. It's not doing a tremendous amount of work here, at least in that axis, so why not take some weight out of it? I'll be thinking on that as I do other work here, but we're gonna go ahead and pull this back out now, build another one of these plastic blocks, and get that into place. That one will be here, this one will be in the front, and then we can actually drill some more holes and mount this guy. So yesterday, where I left off, was with this thing basically in place. We've got our first mounting that's actually secure. Those are clecoed in, so the back is where it's going to be. Now, we need to put some holes up here in our front seat base that are going to support this front guy. So the next thing we need to do is mark those, which is a little bit interesting. We could mark them from the inside, but we can't actually get a drill in here. We have to drill from the outside in. So I am going to, I've got an idea of how to do this. I'm going to put together a little tool to give us an outside mark here. Figure out where that outside mark's going to be, drill our top holes for this guy. That'll get that in place, and then we'll get the bottoms in to match them. All right, so this is all in. We've got our 2 bolts going across now. I used a little trick with a couple of hacksaw blades to transfer the holes across. You can see that these are just taped together, and they let me transfer holes, or mark to transfer holes from the inside to the out. We drilled these, got them in place. At this point, everything for mounting the torque tube is, I think, fully defined. One more drill in the back, and then we'll be done with that. So it is time to move on to other parts of the control system. There's just a catch-all of little stuff we have to do. All of the big pieces are here, but there's a reason that the saying 90% done, 90% to go exists. That's kind of where we're at. I realized that there was another piece I needed to deal with, and while I'm thinking about it, I'm just going to go ahead and make it. And that is this pulley's support. We're going to have a cable coming out of here that has to go around a pulley and go back forward towards the front to get into the tube. So to do that, I'm going to be putting this guy in here. It is going to be back a little way, so it's actually going to be under the seat. So we're going to be hiding this back here, and we need a support for it. So I have gone ahead and grabbed a piece of aluminum here and already put some layout fluid on it. I'm going to be cutting this to the right width to go between those two pieces of sheet metal. Which is just a smidge under 4 inches. We'll cut this guy down. We're going to put a slot in it. This is basically actually going to sit in the airplane like this with the pulley through it. So we're going to cut a slot in it, sink this down, hole through the top. That's going to hold the pulley, and then we'll put some bolt holes in the end that are going to allow us to actually screw through those two pieces of sheet metal into this, screw this in, hold it in place, holding our pulley in place. Well, I screwed up a little bit. I got my slot made in here for the pulley. I didn't actually drill it yet, but the pulley fits into a slot like that. This all would work pretty well, except there's not going to be enough meat left here and here to put screws down in here and actually have any metal surrounding them. They would break out unless I used really, really small screws, which I don't want to. So this one gets chucked in the bin on the altar of progress. I do have some bigger vertical material that I think I'm going to pull out and use. I shied away from that for weight reasons, but I can actually mill that down and put some lightning holes. I was going to put some lightning holes in this one too, and we'll get that nice and light. So the idea lives on, but this particular piece doesn't. So I am going to, actually it's the end of my day for today. I'm going to go ahead and put this up for the night, clean up, and then tomorrow I will come back out and finish off a new version of this piece so that we can get this mounted. Picking up where we left off yesterday, we made this, which was a little bit short. I've now got some taller material, so same, actually slightly thicker as well. I didn't realize that. Well, that doesn't matter. Moot point here. We are going to go ahead and replicate this on a larger scale with this piece so that we can continue on and get it in the airplane. And after much work, here's our finalized piece. Now, as usual, I've used a temporary screw in here, but that is our pulley. So this also acts as the cage around the pulley that keeps the cable from jumping out, since it's all cut very close to the pulley. So this guy, to give an idea of what we're doing with it, is going to go in here, in between the seat base, obviously shorter bolt, and it'll need some bolts and nuts put on it through some holes we'll drill in this. But off the back of our stick here, which is laying on its side, here's our elevator cable. Is going to come back around this and back forward again. So I am fairly happy with how this came out. It was a bit of a trial and error effort to get it to the right size. Had to make a couple of decisions about well, quite a few decisions along the way, and a lot of them were kind of made spur of the moment, but it's a nice light piece. We took most of the material out of it. It's real pretty. It's all one piece, nice and strong. I think with some real hardware, this thing is going to look fantastic in the airplane, although it's going to be hidden under a seat, so a bunch of work for something you'll never see. So I decided that the next thing to do was to go ahead and get this pulley in place, which we've now done. More of the same thing we did up front. We got our little match drilling hole finder, whatever you want to call it. We found all of our holes here. This is sort of an arbitrary placement, but it does have some logic. I brought it fairly far back, and that's deliberate. You'll notice that I've got a piece of welding rod just kind of set in here, and this is to simulate our control cable. And as this goes up here, as you push down or pull up on the stick, is that focused? Let's try that again. As you push down or pull up on the stick, this moves up as it describes its arc. So here is kind of our worst case scenario for the angle coming back to the pulley of the control cable. Now, I had thought we might have to put a pulley in front of this to always keep this perfectly down, but realistically, by putting this further back, which lessens the angle, I think that our angle here is going to be fine. We're not so far out that it's weird coming into the pulley, which is nice. I don't want any more mechanism in here than I have to have. I'd like to keep it simple, so I'm happy with this. That's in, at least clecoed in. We'll put real rivets in it later on, but for right now, that'll hold that in place. I think our next thing, now that I have that secure, is going to be to, let's see, well, two things. We're gonna put spacers up here, hold this guy in the center, and then I need to actually get something welded or somehow secured on here to keep this guy from sliding back and forth like that. We're getting really close to wrapping this whole control system up. Now, I don't know when this is going to air, but today is Thanksgiving, so it is time for me to call it a day and go off and do family stuff. But we'll come back to this tomorrow or this evening and see if we can't get a little more done. But that's all for another episode. I know this was a lot of detail. We're really doing a deep dive on some of this stuff, and it's going to be a little boring to some of you, but I promise we're getting back to the interesting stuff here soon. So if you liked this video, really helps me out. Subscribe if you want to see more of that stuff we've got coming up, and we'll see you guys on the next one.